morning. We are in the end of Perek Chaf Aleph in Yeshaya. Last week we spent the morning, last Tuesday, explaining Perek Chaf Aleph, Pasuk Yud Beis, Oma Shomer, Osa Voke, V'Gamloya, Im Tivayun, Ba'ayu, Shuva Esayu. And we read a piece from Rav Ashlag Sefer about Mave is a Mazik and Mave is an Adam. And he points to this pasuk, and we talked about, the Gemara points to this pasuk, and Rav Ashlag spoke about that there are two basic dominant koiches in the world. This is something that flows through all his Sforim on the Zohar HaKadosh. That's the person who has a dominant personality that he wants to give, and others have a dominant personality that they want to receive, they want to take. And his understanding, his shita, is that all evil emanates from those who have these dominant forces in them to only take and receive. And eventually, when that dominant force becomes so overpowering, they take from others, whether it may be another person's life, another person's money, etc. But his shita that we read last week is that a person has a dominant feature of taking that becomes the source of evil, and through that he explained Maveh and Tefillah and the need for a person to be mispalel, not just for himself, but to be mispalel for others, because even in Tefillah, when a person is self-focused on only what he needs, that can lead to unfortunate circumstances where a person, from always focusing on himself, he becomes a selfie, something that we know about today, and that leads to more and more people that become selfies, the less and less society can exist and flourish. Okay, so now we're going to move on, still in Perek Chaf Aleph, up to Pasuk Yud Gimel, page 158 in the Art Scroll Yeshaya. And here we begin a new Masa. Masa is that word that Yeshaya uses, one of the 10 words to introduce a prophecy. It's one of the words that Yeshaya uses when he wants to introduce a burden. A Masa is a burdensome prophecy. So we've gone through many nations about whom Yeshaya said a burdensome prophecy, Bavel, Ashur, and now he's going to turn his focus to another nation. Masa, turning now to page 160, Masa Barab. This is a harsh prophecy on Arabia. Baya'ar, Barav Tolinu, Ochos Dodanim. Let's take a look at the Art Scroll on page 159. A prophecy concerning Duma. What is Duma? Where is Duma? So turn to page 160 in the Art Scroll. Masa Barav, a prophecy concerning Arabia. This is a harsh prophecy concerning the people of Arabia, namely the descendants of Yishmael's son Kedar. Yishmael, the Torah tells us, at the end of Parshas Chayesara, Yishmael had 12 sons. One of those sons was Kedar. And Kedar is what we sometimes hear about in history books, Arabia. Kedar settled a land, and it was called Arabia. And these Kedarians were famous for being archers. Kedar appears as a wealthy merchant tribe in Yirmiyahu. David HaMelech describes them as a barbarous people. He quotes the pasuk in Tehillim. Yeshaya foretells that Arabia will be destroyed because they had mistreated Israel when Syria sent them into exile and led them away into captivity. So when Melech Ashur took the northern kingdom into exile, sent them into exile. They passed through this area called Arabia, where the Kedarians, a descendant of Ishmael, lived. And as they were passing through this area, the Kedarians were very cruel to the Jewish people. And this is what did they do? We'll soon see in a moment. And because of that, Yeshaya prophesies a harsh prophecy for they themselves, the Kedarians, are being punished. So the pasuk says, again, pasuk Yud Gimel, Masa Barav, a harsh prophecy on Arabia. Bayar Barab Tolinu Achos Dodonim, looking at the English, in the forest in Arabia shall you lodge, you caravans of Dedanites. Okay, now who are the Dedanites? So let's take a look at the bottom of page 160. In the forest of Arabia shall you lodge caravans of Dedanites. Our translation of Dodanim follows Targum Yonasan and most commentaries who translate B'nai Dedan, children of Dedan. Again, Dedan, according to this translation, Dedan is one of the 12 sons of Yishmael. And I'm sorry, one of the sons of Avram and Keturah. And this is a prophecy about what will happen to those descendants of Keturah. The prophet is informing that the Dedanites, who are accustomed to travel through the desert, they will no longer find settlements in which to lodge because Arabia will have been destroyed. The Dedanites will therefore be forced to spend their nights in the forest. The destruction of Arabia is going to have a domino effect. So the people, the Dedanites, who were basically desert travelers, they went from place to place like nomads. And as they would pass through the area that the Arabians, the Kedarians lived in, they would be able to go through there and purchase food and water. But since Barav, the Arabians, the Dedanites, are going to be sent into exile, when the Dedanites travel through the area, there won't be anyone there from whom to purchase food and water. So the destruction of Arabia will have a domino effect on other countries and other nations, including the Dedanites. I'm now skipping to the bottom of page 160, the last paragraph in the Odd Scroll. And this explains why the Kedarians are going to be punished for what they did to the Jewish people when the Jewish people in the northern kingdom were sent into exile by the Assyrian king. What did they do? So although most commentators follow Targum Yonasan and translate Dodanim as Dedanites, Rashi prefers to follow the medrash that explains Dedanim as B'dei Dodechem, children of your uncle, a reference to Israel's cousins, the descendants of Yishmael. Rashi follows the medrash, and we'll soon see the medrash, the Gemara, according to which the word Dodanim are not descendants of Avram and Keturah, who were nomads. Dodanim comes from the word Dod, uncle. And Yishmael, for better or for worse, it's actually for worse, but that's the way the Rebbeinu Shalom set it up. Yishmael and Yitzchak obviously were brothers through the same father. Yitzchak is the uncle of Yishmael's children, and Yishmael is the uncle of Yitzchak's children. So we look at the uncle Nebuch, we have to say it, Uncle Yishmael. The Gemara in Sukkah says that there are three things, quote unquote, that God regrets creating. And I don't know, I can't explain exactly what that means, how God can have a regret. Only a human being can have regret. A human being does something, he doesn't know what all the ramifications of what he's doing is going to be. And then as the ramifications come into reality, he regrets what he did. But if someone knows the entire future, you can't regret what you're going to do because you already know what's going to happen. So when we talk about the Ribbono Shalom regrets, it's a very difficult subject, but we do have this language in the Torah. At the end of Parshas Bereishis, but right before the Mabul, Hashem said, "Nichamti ki asisi es Adam," literally means I regret creating man. After Shaul failed to heed his instructions, Hashem said to Shmuel, "Nichamti ki imlachti Shaul," I regret that I crowned Shaul to be king. So the Gemara in Sukkah says that God regretted three things. Again, whatever regret means. One of them is the creation, bringing about the Yishmaelim in the world. Let's double check that for you. So the Gemara says God regrets three things. One of them is the Yishmaelim. So Nebuch, that's the way it is. Nebuch, it's Uncle Yishmael, and the Yishmaelim are our cousins. So the way Rashi learns this pasuk, Perikaf Aleph, pasuk Yud Gimel, Masa Barav, a harsh prophecy for the Arabians, who are the descendants of Kedar, the Kedarites. Bayar Barav Tolino Ochos Dodonim, the children of our uncle, meaning the Arabs, the Ishmaelim, the children of our uncle. Excuse me, the children of our uncle, you are going to have a harsh prophecy and you will eventually be sent into exile. Why? Because of the following reason. This is something that Rashi brings down at the after Yitzchak was born in Parshas Vayera. It says that Vayigdal al Yelad Vayigomal Vayasav Mishte Godo B'yom Higomal as Yitzchak. When Yitzchak turned 2 years old and he was weaned from Sarah, Avram and Sarah threw a birthday party. Yitzchak became 2 years old and he was now, quote unquote, a big boy. He was weaned from his mother, threw a party. Sarah saw that the son of Hagar, who is Yishmael, is mitzachek. He's playing around. Now, what does playing around mean? He's doing things that are dangerous. Rashi says that he was playing around. He had adopted Avodah Zarah. He was involved in Gil Yarayis. He was involved in Shvichas Damim, Rashi says. And the Rashi, in the name of Chazal, proves that the word metzachek in certain contexts can mean Avodah Zarah, Gil Yarayis, Shvichas Damim. How old is Yishmael at this time? Well, let's do some Torah math. How old was Avram when Yitzchak was born? 100. And this is the weaning party. He's 2 years old, Rashi says. Yitzchak is 2 years old. So if Avram is 100, when Yitzchak is born, and now it's Yitzchak's second birthday party, how old is Avram? 102. How old was Avram when Yishmael was born? The Torah tells us 86. So Avram was 86 when Yishmael is born. At the time Avram makes this birthday party for Yitzchak, Avram is 102. So how old is Yishmael? 16. Avram was 86 when Yishmael was born. Avram is 102 at this party. So Yitzchak is 2 years old, and Yishmael is 16 years old. And at this point in Yishmael's life, he's already Oived Avodah Zarah, Megala Araya, Shvichas Domim, etc. So as we know, Avram tells Sarah tells Avram, Goresh es Oma Zois Vespino, get this maid servant, get Hagar out of my house, get Yishmael out of the house. I don't want them growing up together. I don't want Yitzchak having anything to do with Yishmael. I don't want Yishmael to influence Yitzchak. Avram does this. He was upset having to do this, but the Rebbeinu Shalom instructed Avram to listen to Sarah, and Hagar is sent out with Yishmael, sent out of Avram's home. And they have some water with them. They run out of water and they're in the desert. The pasuk says, they ran out of water. Yishmael and Hagar ran out of water. And Hagar took the Yeled, the boy. How old is this boy? He's 16. Hagar took her son Yishmael at 16 and put him under a tree to give him at least some shade. Then the pasuk says that Hagar walked away from Yishmael, because she didn't want to see Yishmael die. So she walked away from her son. Then the pasuk says, and this is the pasuk that we're focusing on, Vayishma Elokim es kol hanar. God heard the cries of Yishmael. Yishmael was starving to death. He was out of water. He was in the desert, and he was going to die of thirst. And he's crying. God heard the cry of Yishmael. Vayikra malach Elokim el Hagar hashemayim vayomelach malach Hagar. An angel of God called out to Hagar and said, "What are you doing, Hagar? What's going on? Al tiri, don't fear that your son Yishmael will die. Ki shoma Elokim el kol hanar, because God has heard the cries of Yishmael. Ba'asher hu sham. Ba'asher hu sham. In the way in which he is there. Ba'asher hu sham. God has heard the cries of Yishmael, Ba'asher hu sham, as he is there. Now, what does the words "as he is there" mean? So the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah, which Rashi quotes here in Parshas Vayera, but it's a Gemara in Rosh Hashanah. Rashi quotes the Gemara as follows: what does Ba'asher hu sham mean? God said through the angel, "Don't worry, Yishmael will not die, because God heard Yishmael's cry according to how he is sham there." Lafi ma'asim shu oiser achshav hu niden, v'lo lafi ma shu osed lasis. God said, Ba'asher hu sham. And this is, by the way, an idiomatic phrase. When you want to say, I'm only looking at things as they are now, and I'm not interested in how things will be in the future. So there's a saying, Ani mistakel al zeh ba'asher hu sham. I'm looking at it as right now, as it is here and now. I'm not going to think about the future. So Rashi says that God said through the Malach, Hagar, don't worry, Yishmael will not die of thirst, because I heard his cry according to who he is here and now. I am judging him. I'm judging him according to what he's done right now in his life. I am not judging him according to what I know he's going to turn out to be. I know that Yishmael is going to be a Pera Adam. That's what the Rebbeinu Shalom said he would be, and that's what he turned out to be, a Pera Adam, a semi-human being. And the Rebbeinu Shalom says, Hagar, through the Malach Hagar, he's not going to die now. because he's crying out to me for me to save him, and I will save him. But what about the fact that he'll be terrible in the future? Rebbe Shalom says, when I judge a person, I judge him ba'asher usham, what he is right now. V'lo lefi mashu osid lasis. I don't judge a person today and punish him today for what I know he's going to do tomorrow. This is a derech of hanhaga. This is a way the Rebbe Shalom runs the world, and we can't get into the ways the Rebbe Shalom runs the world. We just have these rules that Chazal learn out from the Psukim. We'll soon have a question about this rule. But this is a rule. The Rebbe Shalom doesn't punish a person today because obviously the Rebbe Shalom is Hoya Hova V'yiyeh. He knows the entire future, and he knows today what a man's going to do tomorrow, but he doesn't punish a man today for what he's going to do tomorrow. So Rebbe Shalom said to Hagar through the Malach, he's not going to die today, even though I know what he's going to do in the future, even though Yishmael does tshuva before he dies, Chazal tell us, but we know what his descendants are going to end up doing to the world, to the Jews, etc. I'm not judging him on the basis of the future. I'm judging him according to what he is right now. He's a 16-year-old. Why does the Rebbe Shalom have to say this? He says to Hagar, through the Malach, don't worry, he's not dying now because I'm judging him according to what he is today, a 16-year-old. Now, even though we just learned in the pasuk that Sarah said to Avram that Yishmael is a mitzachek, he's 16, he's already an Oived Avodah Zarah, he's a Gala Araya Shvichas Damim. I'm not judging him according to what he does then, being when he's 16. This goes back to a Rashi at the end of Bereshis. In those days where HaKadosh Baruch Hu was running the world, he's always running the world, but there was no Beis Din. In those days, heavenly punishment only was meted out to those who were 100 and older. It's a Rashi at the end of Parshas Bereshis. Heavenly punishment in those days was not meted out for things that were done when a person was or wasn't meted out before a person was 100 years old. So here, although Yishmael is a Magala Raya Shvichas Damim Oived Avodah Zarah, he's 16, he's not going to be punished right now for it. But something's going on in heaven. There's something going on in heaven by which the Rebbe Shalom tells the Malach to tell Hagar he is not going to die now. She needn't be afraid that he's going to die, because I'm only judging him the way he is right now at 16, not for what he's going to do. Why does God have to tell the Malach to tell this to Hagar? That's all God needs to tell the Malach to tell Hagar is, don't worry, he's not going to die now. He's going to be fine. What is the Rebbe Shalom? What are these words that the Rebbe Shalom is now telling us that I'm going to save him because of what he is now? So this is what's happening in heaven. Rashi, quoting the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah, says, in the heavenly court, the angels were complaining to God. They were objecting to God's plan to save Yishmael. They wanted the Rebbe Shalom to let Yishmael die of thirst right then and there. Why? So the Malachim said, Rebbeinu Shalom, Misha Asid Zare Lahomis Banecha Batzame Atamaydel Loy Be'er. Rebbeinu Shalom, Yishmael is dying of thirst. How does the Rebbeinu Shalom save him? As you remember, when you read the parsha, suddenly Hagar saw a be'er. She saw a little, some water flowing, a little waterway, and she drew water and gave Yishmael to drink. The Rebbe Shalom performed the miracle, and water appeared so that Yishmael can drink water and he can live. So the Malachim are complaining to Rebbe Shalom, he's dying of thirst. Why are you going to make a miracle that water appear to save him from the death of thirst when he's going to kill he's going to kill Yitzchak's grandchildren through thirst? When did Yishmael's grandchildren, Yishmael's descendants, kill Yitzchak's descendants via thirst. So this is what happened. Shenemar, the pasuk says, our pasuk right here, Masa Bara, Perikaf Aleph pasuk Yud Gimel in Yeshaya, a harsh prophecy for the Arabians, the Kedarians, the Kedarites, who were descendants of Yishmael. Baraf Tolinu, Orchos Dodanim, the descendants of my uncle, my Dod. Let's look now at Pasuk Yud Dalid in Yeshaya, page 160. Likras Tzomei, Heisoyu Mayim, Yoshve Eretz Tema, Balachmo Kidmu Noded. Let's focus just on the first words. Likras Tzomei, Hasoyu Mayim. Bring forth water for the thirsty. What happened? Rashi explains here in Yeshaya, and Rashi explains in Vayera, which is where I'm reading from, this the actual episode of Yishmael almost dying of thirst. Likras Tzomei Hasoyu Mayim. Kshoyim Oisam El Arvayim. Yisrael Oimer Oimim L'Shoivehem B'Bakasha Mimchem Holichunu Eitzel B'nei Dodenu Yishmael B'Rachmu Aleinu Shenema Ochos Dodanim. As the Assyrians were taking the Jewish people from the northern kingdom, and they're taking them into exile, they're passing Arabia. And the Jewish people said to their captors, the Assyrians, please let us go in and meet our cousins in Arabia. They're our cousins, right? We come from Yitzchak, they come from Yishmael, they're our cousins. We're very thirsty. Please let us go to our cousins and ask for some water. What happened? These Kedarites, the descendants of Yishmael, came out to greet the Jewish people. And they brought out meat, and they brought out fish that was salted. Now, we're going to have a little kasha here. Why are they bringing them meat? How can you eat meat that was brought to you by Yishmaelite? So we're going to leave that aside. But they brought them meat and salty fish. Now, what happens when you eat meat and salty fish, especially salty fish? You get even more thirsty. So our cousins Yishmael did us a big favor here. We were hungry and thirsty, but most importantly, we're being dragged through the desert near Arabia, and we're thirsty. So our wonderful cousins Yishmael come out and bring us salty meats, and now we even more salty fish, and we're hungry, so we eat the fish, and now we're even more thirsty. V'nodos nefuchim, she'skruim Yisrael she'maleyim mayim, v'ch'nichnesu l'seich piv u'poischoi haruch nichneses l'gufay umeis. I'm going to read this part of the Rashi from our Yeshaya art scroll. On page 161. They begged for water, but instead the Ishmaelites, these Kedarites, brought them salty meat and fish and water skin flasks inflated with air. That's the key here. They ate the meat. We have a question how they eat the meat. They ate the meat, they ate the salty fish, and now they're even more thirsty. And what the Yishmaelim brought out were water skin flasks. It was a type of flask made in those days of a skin. They hardened the skins of animals, and they used it to fill with water. So they bring out now these flasks with water. Thirsty and believing that these flasks were filled with water, they put them to their mouths. The air pressure distended their stomachs, and many were killed. I'm not exactly sure how to explain this scientifically, but what the Yishmaelim did was they took these flasks and filled them with air. The Jewish people were so thirsty, they were already thirsty. Now they ate salty fish, even more thirsty. They took these flasks that were sealed on top, but there was no water in there. They had filled them with air. And then the Jewish people opened the top of the flask. They were so thirsty, they put the flask in their mouth and they sucked in the flasks. When they sucked in the flasks, the air pressure distended their stomachs and many were killed. At any rate, however scientifically that works itself out, the Jewish people were very thirsty. They asked the Assyrian captors, can we go to our Arabian cousins and get some water? And our Arabian Yishmael cousins came out and said, oh, Shalom Aleichem, our wonderful cousins, the Jewish people, here's some meat, here's some salty fish, eat. Now you're thirsty. Here are these flasks, and many Jews died from this distended stomach situation. So the Malachim in heaven are complaining to the Ribono Shel Olam when Yishmael is dying of thirst there after Yishmael and Hagar were chased out of Avram's house. And the Ribono Shel Olam is about to perform a miracle to have a waterway, a small waterway, a Be'er Mayim, appear to save Yishmael from dying of thirst. And the Malachim are saying, Ribono Shel Olam, how can you save Yishmael from dying of thirst when his descendants are going to kill Yitzchak's descendants when they're thirsty, and they're going to kill them? The Yishmaelim are going to kill the descendants of Yitzchak with these flasks of air when the Jewish people are thirsty. Why are you saving Yishmael from a death of thirst if that's the way he's going to kill Yitzchak's descendants? To which the Ribono Shel Olam answers those words that we read in Parshas Vayera. The Malach of God said to Hagar, do not fear, Yishmael is not dying now, but Asher Hu Sham, the way he is now. The Malachim are complaining to me that I ought to kill him right here and now and not let water appear, because in the future, his descendants are going to kill Yitzchak's descendants from thirst. So the Malachim are complaining, kill him now because of what his descendants are going to do in the future. And the Ribono Shel Olam reveals this idea, Ba'asher Hu Sham. I punish a person according to what he is there, not according to the future. Now, of course, this is one of many ways that HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the world. It is not the only way he runs the world. We have examples where in the not in the punishment area, but in the reward area, we have a concept of bara mizaka abba, deeds that children and grandchildren will do in the future are a zechus for the parents and the grandparents. So what will happen in the future can be a zechus today, although it now appears that averos in the future are not considered today. And then we have the concept of nosei avos al bonim, al bnei bonim, al shileshim, al rebbeim, that the present can carry into the future. So there are a lot of ways that the Ribono Shel Olam runs the world that seem to us to be contradictory. And that's part of what we learn about in the Das Tavunos. But one outstanding question about this concept of, it's called Ba'asher Hu Sham. That's what the concept is called. Ba'asher Hu Sham. The three words from Parshas Vayera, God judges a person by who he is then, not for the averos he'll do in the future. The Ba'asher Hu Sham concept. There seems to be a direct contradiction to the Ba'asher Hu Sham concept, and that comes from the rule of Ben Sorer Umoreh in Parshas Kiseitze. Very, very technical set of halachas. There's a question in the Gemara if such a thing even ever happened. But you have a son who's basically rebellious. He's about maybe 12. Once he's 13, he can't be a Ben Sorer Umoreh, different halachas. but he's at a stage in his life where he's 12. The Gemara talks about the exact age. So you have this child, this son, and he's a sorer umorer. He's rebellious. And the Gemara talks about what he needs, what this son is doing. He's eating a lot of meat, and he's drinking a lot of wine. He's not in a good place. And the parents bring him to Beis Din for him to get warned by Beis Din, and the warnings don't help, and there's a whole process there. Eventually, if the warnings don't help, the Ben Sorer Umore is executed. Now this Ben Sorer Umore, we talked about, he's maybe 12 years old. And the Gemara tells us he's Nerag al Shem Sofo. The reason why the Ribbono Shel Olam said that this child is to be executed is al Shem Sofo, because of his future. The Ribbono Shel Olam teaches us that a boy who at that young age is already causing those kind of problems, he's eating meat, he's drinking wine, he's overindulging. For us, we would call that an addict. He's a very serious addict. What happens to an addict? He eventually has to rob people for money in order to pay for his addiction. Eventually, he even kills people for money to pay for his addiction. So the Ribbono Shel Olam said, Rashi quotes this in Parshas Kisei, it's from the Gemara in Sanhedrin, that the Ben Sorer Umore is executed al Shem Sofo. The Ribbono Shel Olam said, we know what he's going to turn into be. This terrible situation in which he's in, he's been warned, we've tried our best. Where this child is headed is he's going to rob and kill people. Yomus Zakai Val Yomus Chayev. The Ribbono Shel Olam says, I'm telling you that these are the signals of a person who's going to grow up to be a robber and a murderer, and then you'll execute him after he robs and after he murders. Why execute him after he robs and after he murders? And then he dies in a state of terrible guilt. He's guilty of murder, he's guilty of robbery. Yomus Zakai Val Yomus Chayev. Execute him now before he does these terrible averos, while he's still a Zakai, before he's a Chayev. The Gemara in Sanhedrin has a discussion whether such a case can even happen because of the technicalities, father and mother and his age. There's so many technicalities that the Gemara says such a case never happened, never will happen. Eladroish v'kabel schar. The Gemara says the reason why the Ribbono Shel Olam wrote this in the Torah is to learn this parsha so that you can be makabel schar. You get reward for learning the parsha, whatever that means in the context of Ben Sorer Umore. But here we have a difficulty. We just learned in Yeshaya and in Parshas Vayera this concept of Ba'asher Husham. The Ribbono Shel Olam says, I only punish Ba'asher Husham for what he is today, not for averos he's going to do in the future. Whatever he does in the future will be in the future. I'm not going to punish him today for what he does in the future. And therefore, Esav is going to be saved today. And he's not going to die today because of what his descendants will do in the future when the Jewish people are thirsty. But on the other hand, we have the Gemara about Ben Sorer Umore, where the Torah and the Gemara teach us that the whole reason why the Ben Sorer Umore is killed is Nerak al Shem Sofo. He's killed for what he's going to do in the future. But we just said, Ba'asher Husham, God doesn't judge based on the future. There are a lot of terutzim to this kasha. One of the terutzim is, that's why he's called a Ben Sorer Umore. There are two translations to More. Sorer, we know what that is. A sorer means he's sur. He goes off the derech, he's off the path. More also can be translated as he's a revolutionary. He's off the path and he's revolting against his parents and against Judaism. The other way to interpret More means like a teacher, More. This child is a Ben Sorer. He's gone off the derech in a very serious way. Umore, not only is he off, but he's teaching others. He doesn't remain in his Dalit Amos and does what he wants. He makes it a point not only to do what he does, but to influence others. That's one of the things he wants to do. He wants to bring others into his life and influence them and teach them how to live life the way he lives. That kind of person, the Rabbanu Shalom says, Ben Sore Umore, is Nerag al Shem Sofo. Yomus Zakav Yomus Chayev. This is a person who's not only off the derech and not only doing these things that will lead to terrible things, but he's teaching others and bringing others into a sphere of influence. There, the Rabbanu Shalom says, I need to rid society of such a person, unfortunately. And therefore, because he's a morer, if he was only a sorer, he doesn't get punished today for what he'll do tomorrow. That's Basher Husham. But once the sorer becomes a morer, then the new rule comes into being, and that rule is Nerag al Shem Sofo. We execute him for what he's going to do in the future. So my point, and again, the Gemara says, according to one sheet, such a case of a child never happened, never will happen, because of all the technicalities involved in the halacha. But we see, however, that the Rabbanu Shalom has different ways to run the world, and we know that from the Das Tevunos. And here we have two extremes. Ba'asher Husham by Yishmael. I'm judging him based upon what he is today at the age of 16, not what his descendants will do to the Jewish people. And on the other hand, there have Ben Sora Umora, who's Nerag al Shem Sofo. He's going to be executed, punished for that which he's going to do in the future. And these two things do not contradict each other. The Rabbanu Shalom, just like a teacher, a teacher in a classroom doesn't have one exact rule that fits all 30 students. There are different students. They're the better students, better behave, worse behave. There are different forms of discipline. This child needs this, while this child needs this. You can't have one strict rule by which you machanech everybody and by which you run the classroom. And there's a whole world out there with an infinite variety of circumstances. The Rabbanu Shalom understands all these circumstances and has all different rules to run the world. And sometimes he'll use Ba'asher Husham. What is he today? I'm not looking into the future, even though I know it. And on the other hand, you have Ben Solomon and Nerag al Shem Sofo. These are ways, two of the multiple ways that God runs the world. They're not contradictory. And the Rabbanu Shalom decides which one to use at the appropriate time.